Hello and welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its history and what it's like to fight in-game. Although today's suggestion, suggested by Old Crow, A-U-L-D, Crow, on YouTube, was a bit of an unconventional monster because I can't tell you exactly how to fight it. I can't talk about its stats because it's not in any of the books, at least not yet. Not for 5e at least. There are currently some statistics that are online, they're homebrew sort of things on the D&D wiki. I'll leave a little link to that down below. But as that's not officially canon, it's not been published in any of the books, I don't feel comfortable talking about the stats of this monster without those. One of the other reasons that we don't have stats is because this creature is a god, not a monster. We are talking today about Old Crow's suggestion of Lolth, demon goddess of the drow, the queen of spiders. However, before I get started, I have one thing to mention, and that is on the 7th of September we will be celebrating the anniversary of this channel. We'll be making videos for a whole year at that point, and to commemorate it I'll be doing a giveaway. I'll be giving away a copy of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, and if you'd like to enter that competition, all you have to do is send me a drawing of a monster from D&D or a homebrew one, anything like that, to my email address, which is info.arcaneforge@gmail.com. My favourite illustration will get the copy of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. Also, I'll be doing a question and answer in that video, so if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, please make sure to leave those down in the comment section below. Maybe give them a little bracket with a video question so I know to answer it in a video. But otherwise, I think we can get started with today's video. Let's talk about Lolth. So this suggestion poses some unique problems. Firstly, I'm absolutely terrified of spiders. Lolth is the goddess of spiders in D&D. So in researching and drawing this video, I have been consistently itching all over and almost feeling the need to panic vomit in levels of uncomfortableness. So thank you very much for that, Old Crow. I'm tremendously phobic of spiders. But secondly, how the heck do you depict a god? Traditionally, Lolth is depicted as a kind of drider, which if you go into your monster manual, you'll see is a drow spider, kind of spider centaur hybrid thing. Usually has the body of an elf and the sort of abdomen and onwards of a fully grown massive spider. But I don't think that's quite right as a depiction of Lolth herself, for reasons that I'll go into later on. I've heard in a few places she has a few different forms. She can either appear as an elegant woman, as this kind of drider form, or as a massive demon spider. So again, that answers no questions, it just gives me more options. But also, she's a god. There's some debate about whether or not she's a demon or a god, or a demon god. I'm kind of going with a hybrid of the two. She's often seen as a lesser deity, but still the matron deity of the drow. And it feels a little bit strange for a god of any alignment of any kind to be easy to comprehend or to completely be comforting. You know, something usual, something that we traditionally understand. Although in things like the Greek pantheon and so on, we've had deities that are very much human, with powers, basically. They weren't seen as all-powerful things. They were seen as very powerful things, but they weren't all-powerful. They weren't all-knowing, all-everything. The deities of D&D seem to be apocalyptically powerful. Things that you couldn't possibly put stat blocks on, basically. Or at least you'd find it very difficult to. And with that comes a degree of alienness. You know, we can't really project a conventional humanoid body onto this thing, because why would it? It represents something more than just being a living mortal creature. It's a complicated idea, a being which represents something entirely. Lolth, as we'll go on to see, is a goddess of deception and spiders, so how do you represent deception manifest as a creature? It's not a tangible idea to be constructed out of, you know, humans are meat, but a god represents a non-tangible concept. But I like a challenge, so I'll have to have a think about it. I feel like they need to be a little bit unsettling, a little bit uncomfortable to our mortal understanding, depicted in their appearance somehow. They should be somehow impossible, and maybe way too grand beyond our comprehension. They shouldn't make sense in terms of how we understand reality. So I'll have to play around with these feelings and come up with my own design. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. We should talk about the basics here. What is Lolth? Who is Lolth? How do we get to that point? So Lolth was created in 1978 for the Descent into the Depths of the Earth module for 1st edition by Gary Gygax, an adventure that takes place in the Greyhawk setting. In D&D lore, well, in the canon lore, depending on how you make your world, you might choose to write a campaign that has more or less of this stuff in it. It might be utterly different. You might not have any of this story in there. You might not even choose to use this god. But according to the sort of canon lore invented by Gary Gygax for D&D, Lolth was one of the elven pantheon of gods before they were sundered, before they were separated into different subspecies of elves, because originally there was one sort of progenitor race of elves before they split up into the many different varieties that we now know, high elves, wood elves, dark elves, sea elves, everything like that. And we know now that she is the deity of, again, deception, but mostly spiders is her whole deal. She's really into spiders. But before this sundering, she was a goddess of cunning, perhaps a little bit of overlap into deception, but also of beauty. She was sort of this Aphrodite-style, opulent, grand queen of elf gods. And we tend to find these traits like cunning, deception, intelligence, wisdom, and things like that in the real world, in real-world religions. Most famously, the one that comes to mind immediately is Anansi, the spider god of Arcane folklore and mythology, most prominent in West Africa. He's the spirit of knowledge, storytelling, wisdom, but among those things he is also the spirit of deception. He's a trickster god, a bit like Loki. He's cunning and often seen as a kind of positive character about outwitting your opponents and things like that. The virtues of intelligence, about taking your time to think about a situation rather than rushing in and going for the easiest option. Arantxe, a character in Greek mythology, was transformed into a spider after her pride in her weaving abilities caught the eye of Athena, who challenged her to a weaving contest out of jealousy. Arantxe boasted of her skill, claiming that not even Athena could best her in her talents. I do not know why a goddess of wisdom and war would be really into weaving, but apparently she did that on weekends, and Arantxe thought that she was better than her. Kind of weird going after a goddess who's a hobbyist, but you know what? Athena was still offended by this, especially because Arantxe's ability, her skill with weaving, was gifted to her in part by Athena. So outraged by her hubris, Athena challenged her to a weaving duel, a weave-off. When they competed, Arantxe spun a more beautiful fabric than Athena's own. And Athena, being a moderate goddess of wisdom, of moderation and understanding, became really furious and decided to tear it to shreds, throw a tantrum, and transformed Arantxe into a spider. Interestingly, Arantxe was famous for dyeing fabric in purple, which was the most rare and expensive colour to the Greeks because it was so hard to come by. It was made out of crushed sea anemones, which is really, really hard to farm because you've got to find someone who's capable of diving down to the depths to grab anemones and then painstakingly crush all these many, many anemones that they would find to make a dye strong enough to colour something purple permanently. As a result, it was so exclusive that only the social elite, politicians, the ruling class, what have you, they're the only ones who could afford purple clothes. So perhaps this obsession with purple and the regalness and opulence and expense of the colour, combined with Anansi's intelligence, his cunning, all went to influence Gary Gygax when coming up with the concept of Lolth, the matron of a people who are inherently clad traditionally in purple. They have purple, blue, black, sometimes pale sort of blue skin, pale white or blue skin, but they're very into their regalness and opulence. I talk a lot about this in the video, The Monster Monday, that I made about the Drow, which I'll leave a link to at the end if you want to learn a little bit more about them. But intelligence, deception, spiders, purple, all seem to be things that are associated with Lolth. Another little interesting thing about Arantxe, the word spider actually comes from the Old English word spithra, which means to spin silk. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Lolth was an elven goddess, second to Corellon. You may have heard me mention again in the Drow video. He's the creator of the elves before this sundering into their various different species. The High Elves and majority of the other types of elf species species, maintained that Lolth betrayed Corellon and tried to kill him, and for this indiscretion, Lolth and all those who worshipped her were banished to the abyss forever, to be alone in the darkness, separated from their creator, transforming those elves who worshipped her into the Drow, and forever altering Lolth herself. But for the elves of the darkness, now banished to the abyss, subsequently called Drow, this wasn't so much of a problem, really. Corellon created the elves by accident. They grew from their spilled blood, and Corellon has always been a distant figure to them as a result. Corellon didn't intend to create them. It's like getting a cut toe and looking down and finding a little civilization where you bled. You'd be a little bit weirded out rather than elated that you've managed to create life. But Lolth was always deeply involved in elvish life, a tangible caretaker of her followers, in a twisted kind of way. But she loved her followers. Whether it was through arrogance and a desire to be praised doesn't really matter to the Drow, because they saw someone who was willing to look after them and take care of them where Corellon wouldn't. And they threw themselves into their worship and love of her. In the Abyss, Lolth saw demonic spider beings cannibalizing each other to survive, and rather than being repulsed and afraid, she deemed this to be an admirable means of ensuring that society grows to become strong and able to survive attacks from outside. Perhaps a way of arming her worshippers if the light elves ever decided to come back and finish off the job. She transformed her new prison, the Abyss, into the demon web, a savage reflection of sort of Darwinian survival instincts, the strong will survive kind of nature, and fashioned herself into the Queen of Spiders, hoping to instill their strength and morality into the worshippers that descended with her. She encouraged the behaviour of what she saw in those spiders, this kind of dog-eat-dog world, a kind of screwing people over is okay, as long as somebody ends up on top in the end, and relished deceit, cunning, trickery, infighting, all whilst maintaining this kind of grandeur, this opulence, this wealth, and sort of a high society image. Everything in the name of power. Think Game of Thrones style, but if power was the only thing that mattered. So you also tend to get things like slavery and demonic worships and practices in Drow society, which the Drow are absolutely fine with, unlike all other societies in D&D really. Demon worship is absolutely okay, demon conjuring, demon bargains and deals, the Drow are fine with that as long as it results in someone becoming powerful. It's all in the service of Lolth. They deal in torture and poison, because causing someone agonizing pain either shows your own prominence, your own strength, your own domination over that other person, or will grant that person the opportunity to rise up and suffer through that, becoming stronger. So no matter what happens between poisoner and poisonee, it still pleases Lolth. We need to remember as well that Lolth was also inspired by the spiders and their elegant webs, their beautiful designs, their meticulous nature. So while this kind of savagery is going on, it also comes with this imperative need for beauty and elegance. Now, Lolth's protectiveness, her matronly nature, is a bit of a misnomer really. She does care for the Drow. However, everything's slightly twisted, so as instead of a kind of omniscient creature that benevolently watches the things that she's trying to care for, she constantly keeps them uneasy, a little bit scared of their own behaviour, because they know that they're being watched by her. She watches through the eyes of all the many millions of spiders that could be absolutely anywhere, supposed to never be more than a few feet away from a spider, and that is the same case with the Drow in the Underdark, all of which report back to or can be seen through Lolth herself. So any misbehaviour, any actions that would displease her, any kindness, stands you in poor favour with her. At the same time, she offers rewards, power, strength, blessings, all fairly seemingly randomly. It reminds me of, and I could not find the name of this experiment, or exactly where I saw it before, but I remember watching a video talking about the nature of training puppies. I remember seeing this experiment where a group of scientists had three groups of puppies. In one group, the scientists were instructed to give them constant attention and love and affection, play with them all the time. In the second group, the puppies were scolded, not sort of harmed in any way, but they were just sort of only disciplined, if that makes sense. And in the third group, a coin was flipped every minute, and this coin flip determined the behaviour of the scientists. And it turns out that this third group that had sort of sporadic, unpredictable affection were the group whose puppies were most easy to train. They responded best, if my memory serves correctly. And that seems to me the kind of life that the Drow are living in relation to Lolth. She gives them unpredictable things, she can conjure them to her own demon web if she so chooses at any given time. She's constantly watching them, scolding them or giving them powers and benefits and blessings, willy-nilly, leaving the Drow to sort of decide for themselves whether or not they have pleased her or not. Maybe one Drow is mysteriously given an insane amount of power and influence. They get an amazing position of political influence overnight, gifted by Lolth herself, leaving the other Drow to speculate. Perhaps they become jealous and plot to kill this chosen one of Lolth out of jealousy. All along her plot being that the one who kills this being is the person supposed to be in charge. That sort of thing. It's always confusing, it's always deceptive, there's always a web of lies and deceit around her actions. But this also ties into the whole Dryder thing and why I didn't want to depict Lolth as a Dryder. Driders are huge, powerful monstrosities. They are great creatures to fight in D&D, and I look forward to one day drawing one for you. And they are similarly brought about through Lolth's decisions, through her weird tests that she can drop upon a Drow at any given time. What tends to happen is, occasionally a Dark Elf will be conjured to Lolth's demon web. She's been watching them, she's interested in them, and she'll provide them with a series of tests which no one is ever allowed to disclose. But they will usually be a set of tests related in some way to deception, cunning, and to intelligence. All things that the Queen of Spiders holds most important. Those that pass this test are granted enormous power. When they return, they are granted sort of influence among their peers. They are someone who passed the test of their own god. They were chosen specifically by Lolth. And as a result, they are heroes, they are champions among the Drow. As a result, many Drow pretend to have passed this test in order to receive the benefits, the praise, and the celebrity that comes with passing this test. Something that would usually annoy another god, but to Lolth, this is just another trick. This is deception. This is another lie, another thing that she values immensely highly. So these people are often praised by Lolth for their cunning and deception in pretending to have passed her test without ever having been summoned by her. But they do put themselves in the dangerous place of being people who are now being watched by Lolth. Either way, if you are summoned by Lolth to her demon web and confronted with this test and you fail, the price is that you are transformed permanently into a Dryder, a marker of failure forever. You are abandoned by your house as a Drow. You are to be scorned forever for failing the Demon Queen, but you are granted this great strength. So it seemed weird to me to draw her as something that she considers failure. She considers a Dryder a failed Drow, transformed in a way to become strong, to best make use of their body because they are otherwise discarded to her. She doesn't care about them anymore, they've failed her. So she transforms them into something more useful. But I don't think she would want to appear as something she considers failure. But I wanted to talk about some of the design choices that I went about when it comes to drawing Lolth and why I picked them. So most notably, she has a lot of faces here. I don't think it would have got past many of you that this is like a nod to being two-faced. She's really into deception, she's into cunning, she's into lies. And so I thought having a two-faced character would be good, like literally two faces. I thought with her being a deity, two faces wasn't enough, and as well being a spider queen, spiders having 8 eyes, I thought, 4 faces, 8 eyes makes this the ultimate queen of deception and duplicity. I gave her a necklace. Again, I was originally going to go for spider eyes, sort of 8 eyes sort of orbiting her neck. It's sort of similar to pearls. Again, this sort of ties into the opulence, the grandeur of Lolth. But I thought one of the things that would be interesting would be to kind of show the scale of her, because there's no need for her to be in any particular form, so I kind of drew them as little moons, which could be the size of real moons, who knows, but also a nod to the fact that her children, or the spiders in general. Spiders generally tend to like to be out in cold, dark places, often coming out at night, but so do the drow. The drow are inherently nightborn. I wanted to give her quite a cruel appearance, so I thought sort of, Disney villain almost, with her huge cape and the kind of like vampire-like cowl. Spiders, Lolth is really into poisons and torture and things like that. Something probably taken from spiders themselves, who, they don't have teeth, they might have fangs. They tend to inject something with digestive juices to liquefy them from the inside out and eat them. So that seems like torture, that seems like cruelty. Even if the creature's been paralyzed by some kind of venom beforehand, that seems like a horrendous way to go. And I wanted to have that, if that's something that's normal to her, something that she thinks is great and fine and to be applauded even, I wanted her to look very cruel. So having a dark color palette was quite important. Also, I wanted to sort of capture this sea purple that I mentioned from Aranchi. It's got a very deliberate pose, a very sort of structured pose there that would look quite painful to us. I gave her a very, very thin waist, for example, to make her look more spider-like, to have this kind of inhumanly separated abdomen and thorax kind of area, but also all the fingers are very tight, they're all very clenched, and that's something that, I wanted to show, all the fingers sort of curling inwards, because one of the things that's most interested me about spiders in general, although the sight of them repulses me utterly, they are really fascinating. Their muscles are only sort of on one side of their limbs, if that makes sense, so they can only retract and pull in like a bear trap, and otherwise they flood their limbs with liquids like hydraulics to push them outwards. That's why it looks kind of laboured and sort of, if you've ever wondered why spiders kind of walk like the girl out of The Ring, as if she's Samara, is that her name? Coming out of the TV, it seems very stilted, it seems like a struggle. That's why spiders kind of move in that way as well, because they are pumping hydraulics into their limbs to stretch them out, and then muscles are retracting them back. And that's why when a spider dies, its limbs curl up because it can no longer force liquid through into its legs. At the same time, I wanted her to look opulent and regal. So this long cape made out of sort of spiderweb patterns, this very extravagant sort of chest armor. Peacock spider, you've probably seen, is sort of the internet's cute spider, quote unquote, that will hold its little legs up in the air, and it'll be sort of blue and red colors. Very, it's the inspiration for Spider-Man. But they're very, very regal. They have a lot of colourful displays to attract partners, and so I wanted her to still say very extravagant. But I really wanted to keep her colour palette on the cool side of things. I wanted to have her rage displayed through her glowing red eyes and through some gems, and through the anguish on the expressions that she had on her many faces. But one of the things that I found was most interesting is the fact that spider blood is supposedly blue. I could not get myself close to a spider to discover this, to be perfectly honest, but apparently spider blood is blue. And that's because, whereas our blood is red, because it carries oxygen through a chemical called hemoglobin in iron, oxidized iron is orange or red, spiders carry oxygen through copper in their blood in a chemical called hemocyanin. Apparently spider blood is blue, so I wanted to keep this on the cool side of the colour palette, aside from these little accents of anger and demonicness. One of the main things that I wanted to kind of get across, though, was her carapace. She's got these sort of areas of very strong armoured exoskeletons like a spider. All of her joints and things like that are still free to move, and I created a brush in Photoshop which is the first time I've ever done that, to kind of make it look like she was actually constructed of thousands of little spiders. It ended up just looking like a pattern, but it kind of got the idea across. I think if I were to draw her again, I would kind of have these in-between sections a bit more sort of lumpy and falling to pieces if they were just like clusters of thousands upon thousands of spiders. But in the end, I do really like the way she turned out. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed drawing her. I definitely enjoyed... Well, I can't honestly say I enjoyed researching spiders, but I did enjoy discovering some interesting facts about spiders and talking about Lolth and getting to draw a god. It's not something I've ever really got the chance to draw on this channel. I've talked about gods a lot, and I have drawn deities for my own campaigns and things like that, but never drawn like a canon D&D deity. So thank you very much for your suggestion, Old Crow. If you have a suggestion of a creature that you'd like to see me draw, please make sure to leave it in the comment section below. I will definitely draw whatever you suggest, but I am drawing them in the order that I receive them, so I'll have to add your suggestions to my to draw list. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave it a little thumbs up, a little like, maybe favourite it and share it with the drow of your party so they can finally see their patron or, well, matron deity. If you'd like a copy of this drawing, please make sure to head over to my Patreon page, where backers at a few different levels get copies of all the Monster Monday illustrations that I do each month, either digitally or physically. And if you want to support the channel as well, please make sure to subscribe because I make content like this every single week. Just a reminder again that I will be giving away a copy of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes to my favourite illustration that is sent to me before the 7th of September. My email is info.arcaneforge@gmail.com. We've had some amazing entries so far, but there's still time to get a couple more in before the competition. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this one. A little bit different from usual. And until next time, keep an eye out for the spider in the corner because it might just be watching you back. And happy monster hunting.